You know, it's whatever I.
It's like-
Okay, everyone, thank you for coming for the day 2 workshop. Today we are going through some new data types, and we're starting to coding for loops. So we can do recursive works if you keep doing the same thing, that going over a collection of data. And the third part for today's workshop will be how to reading and writing files. Like, for example, like if you have a table to process, make some statistics, and how you read the files and output this to the format you want. Okay. So before we starting new stuff. So we are spending some times like going over what we've learned yesterday. Yesterday's we learned about the basic data types. The main one is string. So you remember the string is in Python, you should just enclose a text of characters in a double quotation mark or single quotation mark. So that is the basic data type for strings in Python. And there's we learned 2 numerical data types. One is integers, so there will be the intact digit for specific numbers, and also float. That is the number with the digit after the intact numbers. And these 2 data types, they cover different memories in your computers, and every so it will be different. Although the value should be the same, but like to the computer, it is a bit different in their size. And we learn another data type called Boolean, which include 2 values. One is true, one is false. So when you make logical justifications, whether this statement is true, they can Python can make the justification for you when you're comparing 2 numbers, or when you comparing 2 things if they are the same. Okay, so there's 4 data types we learned yesterday. And we also learns about variables and literals. So the term variables is when you assign this specific text, they will be unique in the whole script in your whole script. For example, if you assign my underscore variables in this IPython sessions, so these every time you type my underscore variables, they will be equals to these strings, my first variable exponential mark, unless you reassign it or you close the session. Okay. So they will be unique all over the sessions you have. So let's go through. So the basic data types, strings. So for here, the variables v1 is equals to a strings, which is quotation mark high there, and you 300 as an integers with the variable called v2. And the float versions of 300, so you will type 300.1, and it will be stored into variable v3s. So the Boolean, there will be a true or false statement. For example, if you want to know if 10 is less than 14, so this is a true statement. So v4, these variables will represent the true values from the Boolean variable, Boolean style of data. Okay. And we so we also learn a little bit about the Python embedding functions. One is called input, So from the name, you know, these input functions, we usually type with input and a parenthesis. So in this parenthesis, we'll have the parameters for these functions. So input will take what you type, what the user type in their on the user's end, I would say. And when you type that, Python will read this as a string. So when you ask for any data type, if you want to be an integer, you need to do casting. Remember, we can casting a strings, for example, 3. If you type this, there will be casting into an integer data type. So this I1 variables will store this integer throughout these sessions. And we also know something called the method. So there will be a more specific to that data types. Remember, we learned about the format method, which is the way we could print strings into the styles we want. For examples, we call the print functions. So within this parenthesis is the things we want to print it out to the console. So we want to print something like A plus B equals to C. So it So let's keep going. So we learn about some Boolean operators. There's priorities and rules for this. For example, if there's not true, there will be a false statement, and not is like the priorities compared to others. And there's or and something. There's priorities like within. And if you use the parenthesis, the statement within the parentheses will be the top priorities. Okay. So this one. So here you can see the not, they enclose in the parentheses. So the things should be read as a whole at the beginning. And or this is a true statement, false statement. So true or false, that will be a false. False and false, there will be a false. So output will be a false statement. Okay, so you should read this one line into the orders we learned and we memorized for Python. Okay. So that is what we gone through for yesterday. Also, we learned about the if statement. So if statement is a logical expressions. We will go, when you do programming, this will happen basically every day and in every part of the code. So which means you will ask the computer to make the decisions for you. And for if statement, there's 3 main things. There's only one thing that is necessary, which will be the first one, if statement. There will be other possibilities or other occasions that happens. So you can add it into else if, or the rest of things will go to the else. Okay, so there will be several else if and else, but these two lines are necessaries, are optional. The only thing that required will be the if part. Okay. So here's we are making decisions to see. So we first assign a variable called a, and it will be equals to the integer 2. Okay, so we first go through whether a is greater than 5. So we know this is not a true statement. If this is true, they will print it out. Otherwise, they will go keep reading the next lines. So the next conditions is we see if a is equals to 5. If so, then we print the number 2. Elsewhere we'll print here we go. So we can know that the result will be this condition is happening because we know a is less than 5 and not equal to 5. So they will go to the end of the code and print it this turn out. Okay, so we basically go through what we've learned yesterday. We know the basic data types, we know the if statement, and we also know the logical expressions, Boolean variables. So let's starting from the last questions we should deal with yesterday's. Remember, we have the leap year problems. Okay, so first we'll frame the questions and make them into the code we want. Okay, so we want to check if a year is a leap year. So by definitions, usually the years, if it's divisible by 4, that is the leap year. So there's exceptions. For example, this is the century years. So if this is a century years, the years need to be fully divided by 400 to check whether they are leap years or not. So imagine you got a numbers, which means a year. How to make sure this year is a leap year or not. Okay. So you know there's two conditions. One is if this is divisible by 4. The second one is whether this is the century years. If this is, they need to be divisible by 400. Okay. So that is how we break down the problems and into different lines, different layers of the code. Okay. So first of all, we can take the input with the input functions. Like, for example, the users will trying to query the year 2014, whether this is a years. So we'll ask the users to type in the queries they want. And this input will be a string object. So we need to casting them into integers with this integer functions. So this years will store the integers or the specific years the user want to query. Okay. And then we keep going and then make decisions with the if statement we learned. So the first things, the year, if this is a leap years, we need to make sure this is fully divisible by 4. Remember this operand, the percentage mark, which means the modulos in Python, which will be the remains from a division. So if this is fully divided by 4, the modulo will be 0. Okay, so we first check if the year is fully divisible by 4. If so, we keep going to see if this is a century years. For the rest of them, we'll say this is not a leap years. Okay, so this is the first conditions, and then we see if this is century years. So century years means, of course, it's fully divisible by 100, which is the century years. So we check with another if statement. if this year is fully divided by 100, so the modulus will be zeros. Okay. And then we see if this divisible by 400. So remember that leap years, if the century years, they need to be fully divided by 400. And the third layers of the if statement is divisible by 400. If yes, then we print this is a leap years. Otherwise, there will be no leap years. Okay. So we see there's 3 if statement happening in these different lines. And also one thing to double check is your indentations. We learned a little bit this yesterday. So in Python, the way we use indentations to separate the different layers of the code. Okay. So for example, if you have this statement for the next lines, it will be within these conditions. You will need to have these indentations at the beginning of the lines, and the different layers, they will go even further. Okay. So this is the Python languages, the requirement to do so. So also you can check if this same layer of the code, they should be fit within the same indentation levels. So for example, this if statement and this else, they are within the same layers of the code, the same if statement from the start to the end. And this will be the second layer. And this one will be the third layers of this is nested if statement. Okay. So let's execute this justifications. We could check whether 2024 is a leap years. Okay. So basically, you know by the math, so this is a leap years. You can also check for other years you want to query. Okay. Any questions so far? That's good. So let's starting for the class today. The new stuff today is how by some exercise. So here I would like you to write a program for a biotech companies to synthesize primers. Is there anyone's like doesn't know about primers or DNAs? So I assume most people know about primers and oligos. Okay, so basically oligonucleotides, they're composed by 4 letters, A, T, C, and G. Okay, so the things we want to do is first ask the customer to provide the sequence they want to synthesize. Okay, so that is the first request. The second is once you take the input from users, you need to check if this is valid to synthesize. The first criteria is the length of the sequence, whether it is equal or greater than 20 nucleotide and less than 26 nucleotide. So that is the second conditions. Is the length of the strings, okay? The third one is the CG content. So it will be the dinucleotide, whether the CG content is equal or greater than 40% and less than 60%. Okay. If any conditions listed here doesn't match, then we print not ideal. If so, if all passed, you are okay to synthesize, then print ideal. Okay. So let's have like 2 minutes so you can write your code down below this the cells, and we can come back and check. So you can think about the different code following the 3 pointers list here, how do you frame the questions and how to put them into the Python code. Okay, so let's check. So remember, you can do any, you can have your own style of coding. You can have any way to solve the same problems. So I'm just providing the versions I have, but you definitely could have the same goal with different code, with your own styles. Okay. So let's tackle this question by breaking it to three pieces. The first one is like we wanted to take the input from the users. So we'll use this input functions and asking the users to type in oligonucleotides. Okay. And we store the user input into the user primers like here's. Okay. So this one will be a context. So this is definitely a strings. So no further casting is required for this part. And then the second conditions we need to make sure is the length of this oligonucleotide. Okay. And the third one will be the CG content. So how do you count the lengths of the primers? For now, we can use the knowledge we learned from yesterday's. Remember, we know about a method called count. So count is a method to count a substring inside the full strings. Okay. So the dot count parenthesis, you can put the things you want to count inside, and then they will return the counted value, which should be an integers, right? So we already know this string should be composed by A, T, C, or G. So we can store the number of A, number of C, G, and T into different variables. So there will be 4 integers output, okay? Count A, count C, count G, and T, count T. So the length of this oligonucleotide should be the summation of these 4 variables. So we store the length to be the summation of A, C, G, and T count. So that should be the length of the user primer, this stuff. Okay, so we can use this one to make sure the length is equal or greater than 20, but less than 26. Okay. And the third criteria here is checking the CG content. So the CG content, which means the percentage of C or G's inside the 4 oligonucleotides. So the content should be the summation of C and G divided by the full length of this oligonucleotide. And we have to put this into this parenthesis to make sure it takes the priority. So we got every variables, every information we want until this line. And then we start the if statement to make the justification for us. So first of all, we can make sure if the length of this nucleotide is equal or greater than 20 and less than 26. Okay. And then we check if the CG content is greater, equal or greater than 40. So it's 0.4, right? And then less than 60%. Okay. So these are the criteria we want to make justification, and we to make both conditions that meet the requirement. So we use the and operand in between. We need to make sure these two conditions they all fit, and then we print this one is ideal primers. Otherwise, if this is not ideal, then we need to print this. Tell the users that this is not an ideal oligonucleotides. Okay. So that's execute this one, and then we can starting to anything we want. So there will be the potential sequence, and then make sure if this is a ideal primers or not. And this will be the really short script, but they can make the justification for you. Okay. Any questions? So next topic we're going to is the loops. So loops, so from here we are starting to learn the new skills by solving the problems. So through trying to find the ways to figure the way to solving the problems, we will know how to manipulate, how to write your code, how to use any if statement and loops to solve the same problems. Okay, so we got a task here. So we need to write a program to validate the password, if this is the valid password or is the wrong one. Okay, so this password should be between 12 to 16 characters in length. Password should have at least 2 uppercase characters, at least 4 lowercase characters, and include at least 1 numbers. So these are 4 requirements showing up. You've been facing this basically every day. And then the hint here is we need to take the input from the user. So it will be input taking a strings from the users. And then we need to output a single string. Either is the valid if the password is correct, or it's invalid if it's not, after the justification for these 4 rules. So it's very similar to what we just learned previously with the primer things we just learned. But we are going through this with different data types and more convenient ways. Okay. So let's start with the new type of data called collection. So collection is a group of objects that with the logical connections. So for example, you have a list of students' name. You have a collection of the scores from this class. So the connections for all of the values inside these collections they're from the same class, and they are names or they are numbers, right? So this is the concept for collections. And strings, the data type we learned yesterday, is, you can also think about this is a collection of characters. For example, if there's a string called apples, you can think about this is a collection of characters like APPLE. So for loop that we're going to learn is very convenient for working with this collection of data, because we could iterate over every component inside these collections and do repeated works. Okay. So let's go to this cells. So we have this context for a for loop here. So here we got a strings called hello exponential mark. And from the context for character in these strings. So from this is very human readable. So we're going through every characters inside these collections. We'll print a tab, okay? And then we'll print the specific characters inside the strings. And then another parameters here is like we print a separation mark of delimiters after every characters. Okay. Let's proceed for this one. So you can see for the first line here, so we are printing HELLO, and every part, the print function, the default setting is they will have a next line at the end, and then they will print every characters with a this end mark here and going through different lines. Okay, so you see like hello have been treated as a collection of characters, and we're iterating every characters inside the strings. So this is the basic usage for the for loop. So we can go over every characters. Okay. And then here is another examples. We want to know what is the sum of the first 10 non-negative integers. So integers starting from 0, right? So we are trying to do the summation for the first 10 non-negative integers. Okay. So for here, we are introducing another functions called range. You can check what the range means by calling the help functions. We can talk about this later. But range functions, for example, you put a 10 inside, they will output from the starting integer, which is be the 0 to the integer 9. So this way, the 10 is not inclusive. So always remember in Python, the number will be starting from zeros. So your output, the first 10 non-negative integers, they will be from 0 to 9. Okay. So we're going over every integers from 0 to 9, and we starting with a accumulative variables called s. And when we iterate over these numbers, we sum these values into the original s with the plus and equal to mark. So they will be adding values to these s variables until it reach the integer 9. And finally, we printed out the summation. Okay. So you can execute the values, the code here as well. And you remember the plus equal to will be the same thing, like s is equal to s plus I. So they are the same, doing the same jobs. Okay. And then we run it. They will list it for I in range from 0 until 9. So there will be the 10 first numbers. And we printed every one. And finally, adding the values to these s starting from 0. And then the summation should be 45. Okay. So this is the usage for range functions. So range functions can create a collection of integers for us. When you giving them the n numbers, and you can also check for the parameters they want, they could be used in range. And we'll use these functions very often in the class today as well. Okay, so from here, the things you need to memorize is we can use this like accumulative variables. We assign this first and then manipulate after when going through the for loop. Okay. And
Quick question.
yes,
Is it like when writing code, is there like a preference that people have for like the s equals s plus I or s plus equals I? Like, or is it just a personal preference?
I guess it's a personal preferences, and you know this is the same thing, and if this works for you, then it's okay. Yeah. Okay. So the range functions here, they will create a collection of non-negative integers. So default setting is that we're starting with 0. Okay. So for here, we don't put the 0 at the beginning, we just put the n numbers, which ends with the n minus 1. Okay. So that we know, so now you might know the basic usages for the for loop and some functions like range. And also there's additional parameters for each functions. So now we are going to know the documentations. So we learned several functions, the built-in functions now, like print, like we know about the range we just learned. So these are called functions. Built-in functions means Python already have these functions written for you. You can call anytime when you want to do so. So, but we don't know how to use it, so we can call the help functions to help you know how to giving this function the parameters, or there's additional things that can do it for you. For example, we can have this here. We just go over the range functions. So you see they will give you if you give this range of numbers, they will print the non-negative values for you. This from 0 to n minus 1. The n is the key parameters you give. But you can also call the help functions. So let's go to the help range. Okay. So they will show up this help messages telling you how to use the help functions. So you can see the default one here is what we just see with the range 10. So here means if you just give them one parameters, which means that this number will be treated as the stop. So which will be the stop of the non-negative integers you want to output. Okay, then they will give you a range object to iterate over. But there's actually you can give them different additional parameters. For example, you can give the range a start numbers. Remember the default is starting from 0. Okay, or so if we give range 10, they will output from 0 to 9. But we can also give them a specific start. For example, if you want to start from 1, so they will starting from 1, the 0 will not be considered. So from start and stop. Another parameter could give is the step. So the default one is the step will be 1. So from 0, 1, 2, 3, something like this. But if you want to do for even spaced, you can give the step to be 2. So they will be from 0 to 4. So this even skipped list. Okay. So we can see from this code. So now we are giving the range a full set of parameters. We give them a start to be 0, the end to be 10, and with 2 steps, which means least even skipped. So you can see what they will output. They will start from 0, and they will print until 10 reached with the even spaced from 2, 4, 6, 8. And the next one should be 10, but 10 is greater than 9, so they will not be outputted here. Okay, so they will give you a list of integer, non-negative integers with the 2 spaced series. Yes.
Not related question. What's the shortcut that you use to remove all those companies? Like, I feel like you just select all those lines and then what's the shortcut to remove?
This one?
Yeah.
You can, if you are use Mac,
Mhm.
so it's command/.
Thanks.
Yeah, so you can also go here. You select them and go to, I think there's a toggle. So you can toggle this. So that will be the same thing. So when you select them and toggle, there will be like hide it or not. Okay. So you can try to play around with this range functions by giving different parameters. So remember that when you go to the help functions, you will know what is the parameters necessary for these functions. For range, that will be the stop that is necessary. But you want additional, you can give them start and also steps. And then when you output this, you can see we are asking Python to go over for every integers inside this range object. And this object will starting from 1 and adding up to 2, 1, 3, 5 until 10 is reached. So 10 will be the stop and -1, right? So there should be the maximum output should be 9. So there will be output. Okay. So now we can also execute these lines and see what is the print functions, but there's additional parameters we could know. Okay. So this is telling you this is a built-in functions for print. Okay. So print, they have the things you could print. They could give additional things like you want us to be separated by a blank spaces. So the default here, as you can see, they will end with a next line mark. So every time you call print, if you didn't change this, they will adding to the next line. Okay. So that's why when we print this stuff, you see from 1 to 9, every component that's changing to the next line. So because this is the default. Okay, so we can try to play around with the print functions here. So if we are printing I with and equals to, okay, we can just use tab. So they will be printed out in different ways from 1 to 9, and there are no next line, but just a tab in between every component. And we want to change into comma separation. So it will be the comma separated ones. Okay, so that is how we find it out how to fully use for a specific built-in functions by calling another functions called help to help us how to familiar with the functions. Okay. So there's also telling you function documentation will shows up. If you are in a Jupyter notebook like we are now, you can press Shift Tab, so the function name will pop out on your Jupyter notebook. So Remember, the task we're trying to solve, the first task we're trying to solve is we're trying to validate for password, and the password should include for uppercase, lowercase, digits, something like that. Okay. So now we are calling for how to manipulate for those input characters, or you can say input strings. We can call the string how to know how to what functions, what class or what modules can be applied to the strings by calling help strings. Okay. So they will list several methods that could be applied to strings. And you can see there's end with count, which we learned yesterday, is how to count some things in the specific substrings inside. Okay. So you will see there's something called is lower. So from the name, you can say, okay, whether this is checking if this specific character is lowercase. And you will find another code is upper here. So this method could be applied to a string object. Okay. So you can see we can use the is upper method to check if this uppercase E, if this is an uppercase by calling the is upper method. And you should enclose this with the quotation mark to make sure this is a string. Okay. So this will be a true statement. So they will tell, Python will tell you this object is a uppercase strings. And this one, we have like 2 digits shown here. And we're asking if this is lower. So you can see they will give you a false output because it's exclusive. There's one stuff that is not lowercase. And we can also see if this specific characters could be a digit. So we see 3. 3, if you put them into quotation mark, they will be treated as a string. So you can also be applied with this method. But we can also see if this is a digit, which means there will be a numbers by calling the is digit method parenthesis. Okay. So back to the task 1, remembers we are trying to validate for the password. There should be specific lengths and specific numbers for uppercase characters, specific numbers for lowercase, specific for numbers. So we can apply this method to the programs we're trying to do. Okay. So let's go from here. So password is we're asking from the user end. So we're asking the users to input a password and taking them as a strings. And then we starting to create those accumulative variables because the concept here is we want to know how many, what is the length and how many of the characters. These are numerical variables we need to keep summing when iterating over the password, every characters. So we are making sure how many characters inside, how many uppercases inside, how many lower cases inside, and how many digits inside. Okay. So we make them into variable equals to 0 and starting to iterate every characters inside the user password. So this is the for loop for every character. So in short, for C, yes.
Because earlier you wrote out character, so you can just see instead of writing.
Yeah. So inside this coding block, so C will be only applied to this coding block. Okay. So for C in password, so for every C that represent a characters, so characters should be adding 1 values. Okay, so keep summation, there will be the full length. And then we check if the C is uppercase. If so, then the uppers, they will adding 1. If this is a lowercase, then they will adding to the lowers. If this is a digit, they will adding to the digit. So there's only 3 possibilities occurring. So we skip the else part of this if statement. We only use this 3 if and else if. Okay. So after looping over every characters in password, we'll have the summations for characters and uppercase, lowercase, and digits. Then we starting to make if statement like justification. First is to see if the length is between 12 and 16. So there will be between 12 to 16. So point 1 here is if this true, and if it's the uppercase, the number of uppercase letters is greater than 2. It's here's lowercase values greater than 4. And if digits is greater than 1, equal or greater than 1. So every requirement meets. So we need to connect them with the AND operand because we need to make sure these 4 criteria are met. If so, then we print valid. Otherwise, we'll print invalid. Okay. So this one will be, we can see if this is the valid password, they will make justification for you. Any questions so far? So I think we can have 10 minutes break now. So we'll be back around 10:05. So let me know if you have any questions and yeah, and we'll be back soon.
Right, and then this is.
Oh.
Okay, so it's the same.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. I forgot to sign in yesterday, but I'll see. It's not great. It's really, but it's not like you're trying. Like it's my phone is so helpful. Get it all because I'm going to do this. Yeah, it's just, but then I feel at least because I'm doing it.
Yeah. I would like
It's like, okay, it's not.
proper class for school. Oh, yeah.
I guess.
All right, since you guys were on break, I wasn't here yesterday, so does anybody have any questions for 275 A and B? I'm the programs manager. So there's no questions for that. Everybody knows what to do. All right, cool. All right, she needs water. She has water. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14,
Yeah.
15.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
18. Nobody online, cool.
Mhm.
Alright.
So this one, like the first one. Mhm. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, I have no idea. I guess it's so. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
So, might be near here, or no? No. Alright. We're going to get in this class and show up.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which one do you like? Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, but I really just usually take that. Because I really because I already decided. Yeah. Yeah. Mhm. Mhm. It's big, right? Yeah, not just like this is what we did yesterday. Yeah. Yeah, because I just found it. This one, it means.
For the, I did the date one stuff,
Mhm.
how do I submit it to you? Like I'll
You
explain,
can save this, and you know where you store this notebook, right?
it's on my desktop.
Yeah, so you can just put your, you can go there and adding the file name with your, names,
Mhm.
so, suffix,
Okay,
and then just email me the.
and with the, with like the new stuff we learned, can we use that for like these questions too? I mean, I already finished it. but-
Sure, if you want, it's okay, like I said, you can do.
Just as long as the output is.
Yeah.
Okay,
Any coding styles you have.
so I'll just submit the whole document?
Yeah.
Okay. This is due next Friday.
Hmm?
Is due next Friday,
Yes,
all the assignments.
yeah, next Friday. Okay, we're back. So. Next, let's see, we're task 2. So we're adding more criterias for the same problems as the string checking stuff. So now it's again like we're checking for the username or password stuff, and also taking the input from the user and then see if the first character in the string is an uppercase, if the last character in the username is a number, which means a digit. Okay, so it's very similar task, but you can see the point now is like we are going to we are checking the specific positions, whether it is a uppercase or lowercase. Okay. So let's try to know, we can solve these problems by introducing a new concept called index. Okay. So index could access for the specific positions in the string characters. And so here, so hello is the strings. So we put the index inside a bracket. So they will go to the specific positions inside these strings. So remember in Python and most of the languages, the starting numbers is 0 and the end number should be the length -1. Okay. So the first characters within the strings, there should be index 0. So if you call this, you can see they will give you the first characters inside these strings. And index 1 should be the second place. So they will give you a lowercase e by calling the index 1. And there's some specific one which is called -1. So -1 will be the last positions inside this collection, inside the strings. So if you put the -1 index, they will give you going from the other side, going from the other directions. And the -2, they will be second to last. Okay. So they will give you this L. Okay. So this is the index we can use. So the context will be putting the specific index inside a bracket that will go to that specific positions. So you can see this is really convenient when you try to access the specific part of the long strings, right? So we can also use this index system to do slicing to obtain a substrings, okay? So the context would be giving them a starting positions and this mark separate by this mark and then go to the end positions. So here is the start, here is the stop. So the start one again is inclusive, which means we're starting from that specific positions. But the end positions, you always need to -1. So it is exclusive from this context, like the range functions we just learned. Starting is inclusive, stop is exclusive. Okay. So what would this give us? We are going from these rings, going from position 1 and also to the second to the last. Okay. And then it's not inclusive. So it should be this one. Questions? So it's really useful to have these index systems to going through a list of data, a collection of data. Okay. And then you can try to play around, like we can go from position 1 to position 3 by calling this one. So there will be 1, 2, 3 within. Okay. Also, do this with the variable assigned. So we can assign the hello strings to be the variable s, and then we access the specific, the position 1, 2, 3 within the s variables by calling the same thing. Okay. Yes.
So when you're doing slicing, the negatives like going towards the end. So if you do -3, that would go like double L.
You mean like here?
Yeah,
So I think they will going over just the 1 characters
so but it's like moving that way, like to the right.
to the.
Oh, to the left. Okay.
Yeah, so the direction is the same, but it's like you can, if you're giving the minus values, so it's only starting from -1, -2, -3, but you still need to go, it's not still not inclusive
Mhm.
because it's on the stop side. Okay. Yes,
Wait, so if it's not inclusive, how do you not the last character that you want? Like from the stop?
from the stop.
Yeah.
Sorry, could you say
So,
that?
so if I'm like, for example, if I do like, 1 to -1,
Mhm.
right, it only stops at the L.
Uh-huh.
Then what if I want like the O too?
No. So -1 is, you wanna go to the end?
Yeah.
Once,
When you do the subscript.
okay. You wanna, if you are going to the end,
Yeah.
always going to the end, you can just skip, sorry. You can do, is just not putting anything in the stop.
Okay.
So this one, if this skipped, which means they will go to the end. Okay. If you are skipping the start, they'll always go into the start. Yeah. So this is the subset for strings using the index systems. Okay. And there's also, for string manipulations, there's also a functions called length. So you can see by the names, it's giving you the length of that specific strings or a collection. Okay. So we previously would just assign as to be the string hello. So we can, you also called length as, they will give you the length of this variables is 5. So this is really convenient way to count for the length. Remember in the previous task, we use accumulative variables to collect every characters and then summation into the full length. But basically you can do the same thing with one line, just calling the len functions, which is the built-in function for Python. Okay, so now back to our task 2. Again, we are trying to validate a usernames that should have at least, they should have 5 characters. And we need to check if the first one is uppercase, if the last one is lowercase. Okay. If the last one is the number. Okay. So you see, we can use the index system we just learned by calling the first character and last characters. Okay. So again, we are calling the username from the user end by taking them from the input functions to ask users to type in. And once they type in, we are making this if statement to see if the length of username is exactly in length 8. Another criteria is the first positions if this is in uppercase. Okay. And the last characters -1. If this is a number, so we call the isDigit method to see if this is a number. Okay. If this criteria all met, we'll print valid. If not, then we'll print invalid. Because this need to be fulfilled altogether, so we are connecting every conditions with the and operand. Okay. Okay. So let's check if this one is the valid username, then that will tell you, okay, this is in length 8. First character is uppercase, last character is a digit. So this is a valid username by this justification. Any questions? Now let's go to our task 3. So then we can have this questions in mind how to solve this. We need to read a digit n from the user and print in a triangle following these patterns. For example, if we're giving them number 3, they will print 1 in the first line, 1, 2 in the second line, 1, 2, 3 in the third line. And so the number of lines will change with what is the n you give to Python. Okay. So you can see the trend is accumulative. It's going from first and the next and the next, and then also go to the line every time when you iterate over the numbers. Okay, so that's the message we know. Okay. So that is the task we would like to solve. So I try to do this with the range functions we know in this class. So remember range functions, they will give you a list of non-negative integers when you give them a specific number here. So by default, there's only one necessary parameters, which will be the stop. So if you give them a stop integers, they will give you a list starting from 0 to stop -1. They will give you this list. Okay, so that's the default setting. Okay, and if you print it out, you can print from 0 to 9 and print will also can change with different ways for printing. But anyway, so range, you can give them numbers and go iterate over this. And we just know about how to fully use the documentation method by calling the help functions. So you can call help and you know like range, you can only give them one stop values like we just show here. You can also give them a start, a stop, and also the space in between every iterate object. Okay. So let's come to this examples for I in range starting from 9 to -1. And then we have even skipped, not even skip, we go decremental manners, then we'll put them the step into minus. Okay. So you can see they will print in the reverse way, starting from 9, we're going to -1. But this one is not inclusive, this one is exclusive. So we'll only go to 0 by decremental manners by calling the space to be -1. So they will go from 9 to 0 in the other in the reverse directions. So we can also combine the range functions and also the length functions. So range give you a list, length help you calculating the length of the string. Okay. So we can accessing the specific characters by the index. Remembers we have a so for these examples, we assign X to be a variable that represent the specific string called hello exponential mark. And we iterate over every characters with the for loop within like we call a list of index. What is this index coming from? This is coming from the length of this string. Okay. So they will give you starting from 0 to the end of the strings, and you print it out by calling the strings and its index. Okay. So let's see what this line gives us. So they will also print hello in from the 0 to the end of the index. So remember what we learned at the beginning. We are calling this by iterate over the numbers, but they will give you the same thing. But now we are combining the range with the length. So they will give, we are accessing different characters with the index systems. The output will be the same from these two lines, from this two for loop. Okay. So if we want to know the specific index for that specific strings, we can also use another built-in function called enumerate. Okay. So we're assigning X to be the string variable hello exponential mark. So for enumerate, when we enumerate the strings, they will have two output. One is the index, one is the characters. So every time you go over one positions, they will give you the index and that specific position. And we can print with the character in the positions in this form. So we print this one and then the index separate and then with the characters. Okay, you can also call the enumerate functions with help to see how to use the enumerate functions as well. So let's run this command. You can see when you enumerate for the positions over here, the index will be from 0, 1, 2 until 5. And the characters will be on this line in C. So they will be H until the exponential mark. Okay. So now we know how to iterate over a strings. So imagine strings is a collection of characters. You can use the for loop by to loop over every component specifically. You can call the index functions with the range plus length functions. So go over every component by the index of that strings. You can also use enumerate to give you the index and also specific items for that positions at the same time. So we are doing the same type of task with different approaches. Okay. Now we can know how to printing on the same line. Okay. So remember, we just learned about the print. So always print that will show things like this. So the default setting is print have an end to be the next line. So every go over items when you call print, they will go to the next line. They will not print on the same line. So for this one, we'll modify these parameters by calling the end. So if you, for default settings, not giving them any other additional parameters, they will print every characters to the next line. But if you are doing with additional and parameters, they will print in the same line, but skipped with a tab like we designed. You can also change into the empty space that will give you empty space. So now let's have some exercise. You can print the word, this string, hello explanation mark, how to print that in reverse order. Okay. So you can do by adding one more cell. Adding one more cells, you can type your answers here and execute it. Okay, let's have this exercise for 5 minutes and we can come back and see. I'll show how I do the exercise. Okay, I hope you got your own answers, how to print these strings in reverse orders. So let's see how I did this. So I first do this with assigning this variable s to be this specific strings, like specifically saying as this one. Okay, so I want to print them in the reverse orders. So I do this in what we just learned about range to go over giving them the step to be -1. Okay, so the starting point will be the end of these strings, the index of the length of the strings -1. So this is the length for 6. So we're going from the position 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I put them in start and going to the end. The start basically it will be the 0. Okay. And then with the reverse order by giving them the step to be -1. And for every I call as the positions by calling it index I in that position. So this way I'll print hello in the reverse orders. So that will give me the exactly hello in reverse order. Okay. So that is with the range functions. And there's another way to going from the end positions, calling the -1, there will be the end positions, and minus the length of the strings, even go one more step to -1, stop. And then also giving them the -1 step. For this one, they will also give me the index and also the strings. Okay, so if I print hello at the end, that will give me this exact same thing in reverse order. So just by changing the start and stop positions inside these range functions, that can also give you the same output for reverse orders of the string s. So there's some special characters you need to notify, like if we this column, if we put the start and stop usually on the left side of the column and the right side of the column. So if I put the column in the first positions here, represent the end of the index. Okay. So if I call the in, I could also sub-slice with the S to reverse order. So going from the end to the 0. So this is the stop and start positions. So you see we can achieve the same goal to print hello in reverse order with the different range parameters going from the forward way, going from the reverse way. We can also use the sub-slice method to just sub-slice with the index systems that will also print the reverse order of this specific strings. 3 ways, same goals. Questions so far? So let's see another exercise here. So we got a user's phrase, and inside this phrase, when we encounter the character or the letter O, we need to triple every O with a hyphen in between. For example, if we see this word, hello world, yo, For every time you see this O, I will print them into this form, triple O connected with hyphen. Then how would you solve this problems? So some hint here's, of course, the first thing is we're asking for input from the user end. So we need to call the input functions to get the phrases, okay? The second one is iterate over every items to see if this is O. If so, then we triple this, okay? And then we need to print this stuff in one line. So remember, for the printing functions, the end is always next line. So we need to print them on the same line, then we need to modify the end parameters into the empty strings. So this is the hint for solving these problems. So let's see this one. So we got a input strings and stored the strings into the variable s. So, and then we start iterating over with the for loop for every character inside the strings. And we need justification if this is letter O by the if statement. So we call if this is character is a O letters, so equal to O, then we need to print triple O connected with hyphen, and then ended with a empty strings. So that we could make sure this printing will happening on the same line with no delimiters and no space. If the specific position is not letter O, we'll print that specific letters and also without any space, any delimiters, no next line. Okay. So we can check if this is this. If this script works, we can call this one and then print it out. So you can see when we encounter O, they will triplize this. And also here and here. And we print all of the characters in the same line because we add this and parameters to be empty space, empty strings, sorry. Okay. So we've gone through several examples for for loop and how to iterate it, how to go index, how to give them index with the range and length functions. That is just one layer of the for loop, but there's also happening like we need to iterate two things crossovers. So this time you will need something called nested loops. So which means remember the task we're trying to solve is we need to print something 1 in the first line, 1, 2 in the second line, 1, 2, 3 in the next line. So we are going through similar stuff every time we're switching lines, right? So we can do this with the nested loops. For example, showing up here, we call number 1 to 10 with the range functions from 1 to 10, okay? So this one will go over every integers that's stored in I. And the next one, we're calling the same thing from 1 to 10. And although these are the same list, but the variables are named in different ways. So I and J are different stuff. So you need to use the specific variables for this one. And we printed out the multiplications for I and J, and then tab separated form. Okay. After this, we call print, which means they will go to next line. Okay. So this one will give us a multiplication tables from going from 1 to 10. So let's see the output from here. So you can see we can have for every I from 1 to 10, every J from 1 to 10, okay? We print I and J, 1 plus 1, 1 multiply 1, 1 multiply 2, 1 multiply 3, tab separated until 1 multiply 10. So this line J is over. So we go to next line by calling print without any parameters. So the default will be, so this is the default setting. Okay, so they go to the next line. So this will give you the multiplication tables. 1 multiplied to 10, and then 2 multiply with 1 to 10, like this, going to next line. Okay. Okay, now we wanna add some more decorations to these tables. Then we need to print multiplication table with this format. What this format is, we have this separate between column names and row names. Okay, how do you deal with this? So for these things, you can see the patterns. We are still printing the same multiplication table with the nested loops, but where we need to add it for the separators will be when we iterate the second loop, we need to add these columns to the when we iterate over the second loop. We need to add this line, dash lines, when we iterate over the first loops. So we can see here's, we're still doing the same thing, calling the nested loops for I in range 1 to 10, integer 1 to 10, J for integer 1 to 10. And we are still doing the multiplications for I multiply with J and tab separated, okay? But what things happens is like when J is equals to 1, which means J is equals to 1, okay? Then we need to print additional separators here and give them another tab, okay? So we'll have this happening every time we encounter J equals to 1. And then give a next line, okay? And then another if statement we need to make is like when I equals to 1, so we will be this line, the first nested loops. So we'll print 88. So you see like from here to the number, this will in total have like 88 dashed mark. So this will give you the exact same tables like above, okay? So now let's back to our task 3. Remember, like what we are trying to solve is to have a triangle in these patterns accumulated from 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3 until the user input n. Okay. For example, if n equals to 3, we'll have this style 1, 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3. So how would you solve these problems? We can use the technique we just learned for nested loops for going over the user input n as digit, okay. Things to remember is like here, the n, we need them to be inclusive. So the end will, of this range functions will be n plus 1, okay, for range I to n plus 1, and j and I. The next loop will be starting from 1, but it is I plus 1 to going to the next one, to the next line. and then we print that specific numbers and end with a empty, empty space, and then go to the next line. Okay. So if we give them a number 3, they will starting to print 1 and 1. So I will be 1 in this line, and then +1, so there will be 1, 2, and space with 1 empty space. And then go to the next line, and 1, 2, 3 with an empty space happening here. Okay, just to make sure the loop you are making, what is the start, what is the stop? Yes.
Would it work if you just didn't put anything to the stop to go all the way? Or like, why would you have to put anything?
Oh, so this one,
Is it just because it's not like it affects?
no, it's for end here's is we need to take from the user end. So and from these examples, I want to make sure they are the exact same thing. So here they say n is equals to 3, and they print it out, which means the 3 is inclusive, right? So we need to use the end to be +1. If we just use 3 here, they will only print until 2.
But
Yeah, is that a question?
before, when you didn't put anything, it went all the way to the front, when you did the range. With the coin.
Yeah, but if you, the range is if you just give them one, how to say, 1 parameters, there will be the stop. If you give them just 1 parameters, there will be just 1 numbers. Yeah. Okay. Questions? Okay. Now we spend some time to introducing another loop format, which is the while loop. So from today's, the first part of the class, we know several times how to iterate over a strings with a for loop, right? So for the from the start to the end, we call every characters inside that strings. So another type of loop is the while loop. It could give you indefinite loop form. Okay, so let's consider this task first. Count the total number of digits in an integer numbers. So for examples, if we give them a specific numbers, we want to know the total number of digits. So you can see is the problem is the decimal systems, how to make them into the next level of the digit. Like 10, there will be 2 digits. 100 will be 3 digits, like this. Okay, we can do this very simple way to treat this integer as a strings by casting, and then count the length of the strings that will tell you there's 5 digits inside this I1 integers. So this is the convenient way to do so. If this one is not a possibility, then how do you do this in a numerical ways? Okay. Then that's the time we need to introduce the while loop. Okay. So while loops that will repeat the code until the condition is no longer satisfied. So we can see the simple examples. Here's we assign a variable j to be integer 10. So we are iterating over with the while loop. So the condition we set is if while j is greater than 5, then we need to print j. And then we'll do the same, at the same time, we'll -1 for j. So the J will go down from 10, 9, 8, over times until J is no longer greater than 5. So this is what the while loop is doing. So when this condition no longer met, they will break the loop. Okay. So we can see the example output here. We're starting from 10. So 10, okay, greater than 5. So I'll print this and then -1. Then J becomes 9. J becomes 9 if J, so 9 is greater than 5. We're still printing them and going down until when J is 5, this criteria no longer met. I'll no longer print it. I'll break this while loop. Okay. So this is what while loop is doing. Okay. So for while loop is the key point is how do you set up for the conditions. So this time is like we might have to use the conditions for Boolean variables. Okay. So we learned about Boolean variables yesterday. So there will be 2 values inside the Boolean variable categories. One is true, one is false. So imagine for while loop, for this kind of indefinite loop, the statement is not true, the statement is not false, then we break the loop. So that's when we need to take advantage of the Boolean variables. Okay. So here we can see several special issues with the Boolean variables. For example, for empty strings, this quotation mark, integer 0 or float 0, they will be interpreted as false. Non-empty strings or non-zero numerical values are true. So this is additional options for Boolean variables. We can print it out here. If we give them an empty strings, they will print false. So this is also false because it's 0. And this is non-empty strings. This will be true statement. Boolean 1 will be true. Float 1.1 will be true as well. Okay. Now back to we know the base for solving the task number 4. We want to count the total number of digits in an input positive integers with using the while loop. Okay. So let's see this. We can have how to solve this with the while loop. First of all, we need to have the integers taken from the user end and casting this input into integers, store them with I. Okay. And we set up a accumulative variables to be count. Okay. So while I is greater than 0s, so which means we're starting from the input numbers. Okay. We'll divided this value with 10. So this, remember this operand, which means the fully divisible. Okay. Which means if it's 100 that was fully divisible, these things will keep dividing by 10. Okay. So the count will adding 1. So which means one more digit. Okay. Until I is no longer greater than 0. Okay. So let's see. Our examples here is 4, 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4. 4, 5, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So this program will tell us these integers have 5 digits. Okay. With the while loop. Any questions about while loop? Okay. So next we're going through the task 5. is trying to introduce other component for the loop categories. So for the task 5, we need to have a chatbot. So the chatbot, first of all, they will asking the questions. So it will repeat the user's phrase, except for questions. So the question definition here is anything ended with a question mark. So the chatbot will answer, I don't know, when user asks questions. They will stop the conversation when user says nothing, which means no input taken from the command line. Okay. So we need to have a chatbot follow this rule. Okay. So you can see there are several conditions. One is they will keep asking questions. If the users keep asking questions, chatbot will keep saying, I don't know. So when users decided not to do anything, give them no response, saying nothing, so the conversation will stop, which means this chatbot will shut down. So this is time we need to use the break inside this for loop. We see the for loop here keep happening for asking questions. So we need to break the loop from introducing additional break inside those loops. Okay. So the break and continues are two components that we might use inside the loop systems. The break command serves as a premature exit from the loop, which means you can give this statement saying when some criteria met, we exit the loops. When some criteria not met, then we exit the loop. Okay. The continue command serves as a skipping for these specific cycles, which means they will keep reading to the next lines, not next line. We're going to another round of the cycle, but just skipping the current ones, but keep continuing. Okay. So for example, shown here for break, we give a variable n to be integer 5. So we are iterating over integers from 1 to 999, okay, from range 1000. When I is greater than number 5 here, I'll break the loop. Okay, so in the same level, I'll print I for each levels. Okay. So this one, you can see what would happen is even though we want to loop over 1 to 999, but whenever I is greater than 5, this loop will break. Okay. So you can see from here, they will only print until I equals to 5, which means this condition no longer met, and this condition is met, and we break the cycle. We break the loop. So this loop ended earlier before it reaches the stop values for this range. Okay. So this is how we use the break to stop the specific loop. So let's see the example for continue. Remember, continue is just skipping the current cycle, but still going over the original loop. Okay. So as we designed this to be a string called hello world, and we iterate over the characters inside this strings. Okay. So so if C is equals to E, the letter E, or C equals to letter O, the loop will keep going. Continue means skip the current cycle. Otherwise, they will print the specific character at that positions. Okay. So we want to print everything on the same line, so we'll use the end parameters to be an empty string. So let's see what the output from this continue examples. We can see we're trying to go over print every letters inside the strings. But when C is equals to E, or C is equal to O, should be here. We skip these cycles, which means the print will not be executed, but loop is still going. So we now go to the next characters. So they will go to L, keep going, oh, okay, this met, we skip this, but continue, they'll go to the next characters. Okay, so this is the continue method inside the loop systems. Now we are going back to the task 5 about the chatbot. We want a chatbot repeat the user's phrase if this is not a question. If this is a question, which means this the phrase end with a question mark, they will answer, I don't know. So you can see this two part is a indefinite loop. Let's keep asking, keep asking, keep asking. When this will break is when the user says nothing. This loop will break. Okay, we'll keep inside the loop and break until the user not giving anything. So this one, from breaking down the questions, you can see that now we can know this is an indefinite loop. So we are using with the while loop. While the condition is true, it is still satisfied. Then we asking for the string from the users saying, say something, so the users will type something. So if user is not typing, we'll break this loop, which means the chatbot will shut down. So if the users is giving something and end with a question mark, then the chatbot will answer, I don't know. Otherwise, the chatbot will print exactly what the users input. So this is the while true loop for this chatbot. So let's see what the output is. So like say something. So if the users is typing hello. And then the chatbot will keep asking questions, still asking for say something, right? Because they will repeat the things. Okay. So this criteria is not met. So while true, the chatbot is still running. But if I type hello, which means the strings end with a question mark, it's a question, the chatbot will say, I don't know, but still pumping out this dialogue asking for something. If not, I'm not typing anything. The chatbots will shut down. They will go to this one, the break lines. Yes.
Okay, so like, if you don't put anything as, so as the Boolean is false,
Yes.
and then the second, like the if not as means if not false. I like,
Oh, you say, I guess if we are saying S should be a strings, right? So if
Yeah.
nothing happened, if there's no such S, so not S, which is a, so S is not a Boolean variable.
Oh.
S is a strings.
it's just,
Yeah, I think you're saying if the S is an empty strings, if you call, this one, call empty strings, this things is a false.
oh.
Yeah, so this different stuff. So here S is a strings because it's the output from the this functions.
So
Yeah.
just if not S means
S
if
mean,
S is not empty.
yeah.
Okay.
Mhm. Okay. Let's have this exercise and then we can have the break. Complete the following code to print the numbers in a range using continue and break. Okay, we give them a start and a stop, asking for the user input, and then for I in range 8,000, I'll print it with the continue and break. So we are giving them the start and stop. So if the start is 10, the stop is 15, the output will be only printed out the range in between. Okay. So here, we just follow, the instructions. So the start will be the integers coming from the user end. They will asking you for the start positions. And the stop will be the user end input for the end. We are looping over the integers from 0 to 999. So if we are only printed numbers in between the start and stop. Okay, so anything outside of this range will not be printed, but will continue with the start, but break when it's more than the stop values. Okay. So let's see what the output, we can give them a 10 as the start and 15 as the stop. So they will print it out for 10 to 14. So when it's greater than the stop, the loop will break and no longer continue for going over beyond 15. So this is how you use the continue and break technique. Okay, so we'll have a 10 minutes break now. So if you have questions, I'll be here. Next hours, we're going over the list system, which is the really useful collection of data in Python.
I might miss that part,
Yeah.
but this,
So this is the operand to do the division.
Yeah.
So
What is it?
remember,
like I know the integer, like you got the integer result from this, like I divided by 10 and you get return it integer.
so which
But what is the equal?
so remember the plus equal.
Right.
Yeah, so this is similar stuff, but it is the division version. So we have I as the starting numbers,
Oh.
right? So it will keep divide,
keep doing it.
yeah, keep divide by 10,
I see.
and then going over.
Okay,
And this is a fully division based on double slash.
all right.
So only counting for 10, fully divided by 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Okay. Okay, let's continue our last part of the workshop today. So We spent a lot of times going through what we learned yesterday and also going through the different types of loops. The first type would be the for loops that iterate over the example we used would be strings, right? And then we also learn a little bit about indefinite loop. There will be a while loop. So for loop will usually have a specific range of data, but while loop is that will break when the criteria are no longer met. Otherwise they will keep going. So that's why it is called indefinite loop. So that is what we just learned. So now we are going to another type of collection data. So remember we talked about strings. So strings would you can see like a text strings, there will be letters, uppercase, lowercase, and also could be digit. If this is enclosed by quotation mark, this is a strings. So in Python, usually strings is also a type of collection data, but most of the time the collection data, the most useful one would be a list. So we can go over this very quick. So let's first have this task in mind, what we are trying to achieve with the list data types. So the task here is we're trying to print an integer in a binary format. Okay, you might know about binary format. So it's usually a format when the computer knows. So the digit will be binary, which means there will be only 0 and 1, 0 and 1s. They will move into another digit if this exceed 1s, right? So it's different than what we are usually do with math, which is the decimal systems. But the idea, the concept is the same. So binary is, you can think about this is the two versions to make another digit. Okay, so the task we want to do is to print the integer in binary format. So we'll take the input from the user end, and then there will be a decimal format, right? Like 10, there should be a decimal format. And then we'll print this integer into the binary format. So binary representations, the sequence of remainders of successive division of an integer by 2 reversed. Okay. So to do this, we can think about this in the way with algorithm is like we design a while loop, divided the number by 2, store the quotient and remainder, stop when the number is 0s. So we are going down, going the keep divisions until the number is 0. Okay, then I'll print the result. So you can think of this is an indefinite loop, so they will use the while loop. While true, something like this, they will keep going until the condition met, they will break. So let's start to know about the list of data. So list is one of the tools that collect multiple data. So for example, this is capable to store average high temperatures in Westwood. So like in this, we assign this variable to be a list data. So this data will be the average temperatures in Westwood. Okay, so the list context is the every value inside a bracket. Okay, and then delimited by a comma separator. So this is the list context in Python. And also list can store different data types. So this one will be a list of integers, and we can also create a list of my favorite fruits that will be this one. There will be a list of strings like bananas, mangoes, and apples. Okay. They can also collect different data types, which means inside the list, there could be numbers, there could be strings in the same time. So we can concatenate list using the addition mark. So this is the way we can do the list addition. So you can see when we concatenate these two lists together, we'll start with the temperatures and then go to with the integer, the strings. So these all together summation into one list. So this list will be 2 data types. Okay. So message here is this addition mark, addition operator, this concatenate different lists and like what they can do to the strings. We used to have the concatenation for strings with the addition mark as well, right? So for the list type of data, there's a collection data, they share many common points with strings. For examples, list can be multiplied with integers. Like this one is a list of integers. I want to multiply this to 3 times, okay? So the output will be repeatedly going to every items 3 times into one big list, okay? So it's not 3 lists, but it's the one list with the multiplications for the components inside, okay? And you can also use the length functions to count the length of that specific list, like we can do with length with a string to see the length of that strings. Okay. So when you counted the length of this multiplication, it will tell you the return will be a list with length 9. Okay. So list as well that can be iterated like a strings. So this is the basic functions for the collection type of data. Remember, we do the for loop to iterate every characters inside the strings. We can do the same iterations for every element inside a string. Okay, so this one will go over every element and then print that specific element and then eliminate with a colon. Okay. So these things will print every component 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and separated with a colon. Okay, so it's very similar to strings, but it's just different data types. Okay. So we can also check if specific elements, specific items inside a designated list. For example, we can just use the keyword in to check if integer 2 is inside the list of integer 1, 2, 3. So what would this command give you? This will give you a Boolean variables to make justification if this is a true statement, right? So 2 is in this list, so they will give you a true output. If you give this 4 to check if the 4 is in this list with 1, 2, 3, they will give you a Boolean variable called false because 4 is not inside this list. So it is very convenient to use the keyword in to check if the list have specific components. Okay. Another usage for string we learned today is the index system, remember? So the index systems can help us go to the specific characters inside the strings. So list can also be accessed with the same type of index systems like we do with strings. Okay, so here we assign this numbers to variable to be a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in string format. And we want to know the third component. What is this? So we use the index systems. Index systems is a integer inside a bracket. Okay, so we want to know the third component. We'll go for third minus 1. So we put 2 here. They will go to the third positions of this numbers list. So they will give you, okay, in the third position of this list will be 3 in string format. Okay. So now we know there are several features shared between list and strings. Okay. Also, for the index systems, remember we can do sub-slicing for substrings, right? So for list, you can also sub-slice a list with the same systems, okay? For example, if we go for 2 to 4, they will give you position 3 and position 4. Okay. 3 and 4 showing up here. So the slicing in list can be nested. What does this mean is we go to the first index 3, the third component for this list. So we know this is a strings, right? So this strings, we want to know what is the third characters. Okay. So that will give you, we go to another index systems for the, just append this index system to be 2. So they will go to this third components in the third positions of that specific strings. So we will have letter R popped out for nested slicing. Okay. Again, like we can have a range for index systems to going from position 1 to second. So we can have 2 and 3 popped out when we call a subslice. Okay. Also, the subslice could be nested. We go to next to the last, and then going to the reverse order, right? So we'll have second to the last, this one, and we go from the starting to the end, but not inclusive. So they will give you 4 without an R. Okay, so that is very similar to what we have learned in the string sessions. Okay. Here is an example showing like list can even keep another list as internal element and processed with an inner index. So this is a very complicated list that include integers, include strings, include another list and another list. So this is a very complicated list. But if you know what is inside, you can see what you can go to the specific component with the index and even nested index inside the sub list. Okay. So we assign for the bar variables and then go to the last component. So it should be this one. So we know this is the list. We want to go to the third positions of that specific list. Okay. So we'll ended up going to this specific position. Okay. So list could be a variable of collections. And this another examples, we want to know the third items, first positions, and the first characters. Why we have this triple index is because we know the third positions here is a list, so we can have a second index. We go to the first position in this list, and this is a string. String could be indexed as well. So we go to the second positions to be this strings. So it should be a W popped out. Okay. So this is based on what we know inside the list. So it's just a demonstration, like list could be very complicated. It's not a uniform of data types. It could be a complex and even a nested list. Some method could be applied to list. So we learning the very common one, which is the append method. You can see the dot append with the parentheses. Within this parenthesis, you can add the component you want to append to the specific list here before the dot. Okay. So we assign, in this code, we will assign A to be a variable. This variable represent a list 1, 2, 3 integers. And then we wanna append another integers, which is the 0 to this list A's. We could just call A dot append and put 0, the thing we wanna append into, and then call A again. So you can see the A originally to be 1, 2, 3. After we append another variables zeros, the A will become 1, 2, 3, and 0. Append will always go to the last positions of that list. Okay. So now we know the basic concept for list. And now let's getting more understanding what is the difference or similarities between list and strings. So first of all, strings is immutable, but list is mutable, which means within a list, you can assign values to an element once it's assigned. But for strings, you cannot do that you cannot do that to change specific characters inside the strings. Okay. For example, we assign S to be the string hello exponential mark. These are strings. So we go to the second to the last variables, second to the last index. So that should be this O. We wanted to assign this position to be string format of 0. What this will do is they will raises a type arrow telling you string object does not support item assignment. Okay. This means strings is immutable. You cannot change the specific element inside strings. Okay. But you can do this in another way by changing string to a list first, and then mutable with list, and then convert them into string back. So that is how you change a specific positions inside the strings. So this is an examples. We know S is a string, is the hello, this one. So we first call the list functions. The list functions will change the input strings into list by splitting every characters. Okay. So ls will become a list of characters. And we go to the second to the last position of the list and changing them into string format of digit 0. Okay, then see what it will give us. See what else. Okay, so ls will be a list of characters composed by HELLO exponential mark. And we go to second to the last and muted it to be 0, but not O. So you can see inside this list, the value has already been changed. Okay. Now we convert this list back into strings by calling. We can do this in different ways. So this is not the way you can convert for list to strings, because you can see the return that will make the whole thing into a type of strings. But we can do this with the joint method we learned yesterday. So we know this ls is the list of characters. We'll join every component inside the ls and then into a empty strings. So this s will be a string format of this ls list. Okay. So let's just call this, and then it will tell you the ls after converting back into strings, it will become HELL 0 exponential mark. Okay. So that is how we do the changing the items and or reassign the items inside the list. We can do this with list, but not for strings. Okay. So we know about the documentations in that we can call for built-in functions like print by calling the help parenthesis. We can also see the method documentations by calling the dir functions. So this one will help you to find out what methods or a certain class has. Okay. What does this mean is if we got a object, for example, which is a list, which is a list and including integer and strings, what type of method can we apply to this specific variables? Then we call this dir method or the dir functions to find out what can we apply. Okay. So let's see how this goes. So we know a list is the list. So we printed out the output for the dir, the documentation for a list. You can see what we can apply to this list data. We can use append, we can use extend, we can reverse, remove, pop, or sort. So these are methods we can apply to a list. So this data. Okay. Let's see. So now we can apply for count too. So when we print a list that count specific items, it will give you the integers. So there's no occurrence of integer 2 inside this a list. If we change this into this one, we can expect the output to be 1. Okay, so the dir, these functions will help us what we can apply to these specific variables. Okay. And for specific method like join, remember this is the join, we can call help with this context to call the function, how do we apply for the specific functions. They will tell you, they will concatenate numbers of strings. Okay. And also shows an examples what the output of join will give. Okay. So let's have this exercise, find out what method list would have. Okay. So this is basically the testing for the dir functions. And read about the sort and reverse functions for the list. Okay. So let's you do this with the examples listed here. So we assign a variable L in short for list. So this list is composed by 3 integers, 2, 1, and 3. Okay. So this is the L list. And we do sort. Sort, you can tell from name, is will be make the data in orders and print it out. And we can also sort it, calling the sorted functions. Okay. And the reverse, by the name, you will know it is making the original order into and reverse it. Okay. So this will be the application for sort and reverse. So you can see originally L is 2, 1, 3 with not in numerical orders, but once we sort it, call L with the sort functions, we print it out. This will become a sorted version of L, will be 1, 2, 3. Okay, yes.
So are the sorted and unsorted the same?
It's very, so I would say it do the same thing, but this one is the method and this one is a function. Yeah, so for function, you need to store this one if you just call sorted L, they will apply and print it out, but they will not change the original data. Yeah, but for this one, they will change. So when you print here, it's already in the sorted format. Yeah, so this one you probably need to store into another variables. So there will be a sorted form. So the reverse one will make the list into the reverse order. Again, it is the method. So once we apply the method to the L list, the output, this will change in place and the order will be reversed into descending orders. Okay. So now back to our task 3, remember? So originally we were trying to print an integers into binary format. And the binary format definition is like, they will, integer that will be a sequence of remainder of successive division of an integer by 2, and then it is the reversed. Okay, so here will is the hint how we deal with the programming part. We will design a while loop and then keep dividing the numbers by 2 and store the quotient and remainder and stop when the number reaches 0. Okay. So here, the examples will take the input from the user end, casting this into integer, and we store into variable I. Okay. And then we give them a accumulative variables, which is a list, an empty list. So I design this to be 0. So we'll keep doing the division. So we are designing an indefinite loop, which is the while loop. So while I is still greater than 0, the loop will continue. Okay. What the loop will do is I will append this empty list will append the modulos for I divided by 2. So this will give the remainder. Okay, and then see if the remainder is keep dividing by fully divided by 2, and they will continue doing the division until I is 0. The loop will break, and then we need to reverse the order because this is the definition for the binary format of digits. Okay. And then this is the string manipulations. We wanted to make the strings here into a real strings. Okay. So for every element inside this empty list, I'll append this to this one and then join them in the final. Okay. So this is what the program do. That will tell you the binary format for integer 24. It will be 11000. Okay. Question so far? So we basically just go through what we can apply to list and what is the difference between list and strings, what we can apply to list. If we don't know what we can apply, we can just call the dir functions to see if we can apply count, we can apply append to that list, and then do the programming. Okay. So now we'll spend like 5 minutes for the last part of the class. We trying to read and writing the files to do, which means they will read existing files into the memories, and you can read and process the data. And once you are done, you can store the data by writing the files into the text format. Okay. So writing files here's is the context in showing up here. So we can call the with open functions in the open functions, we'll open the file name and tell them it is the writing format. And we call this as an F output is the variables. For this files, we are writing a strings, and then we're writing another strings and keep writing another strings. Okay. So now we can execute this stuff and then call this. So you can find this file inside the same directory as you store for this IPython notebook. Okay. So for me, I store in my desktop. So this is popping up here. You can see this just modified just now. So it's created and you can open with the text editors. So this is what we just wrote inside the files without any next line in just one line. Okay. So this calling the with open, you can create a file, telling them is the writing form, and then write things into strings. Okay. So this here is just another examples we can do for writing files. Here we use the with keywords. Here we don't, but we just assign this output to be a variables. But for this method, you will need to close the file at the end. But basically, these two stuff are doing the same thing. Okay. So this is the way we write specific output to a file. We can also read the files by calling with open. This one, there's without any additional there's the default setting will be this is the reading format. So we are reading this file as a variable fn. And then we can iterate over every line inside this files and print in the lines. Okay, remember we just write these files. Now we are calling read this in and printed every line inside the files. Okay, so we can read these files and they will print the lines here. Okay, just the with open and in reading format. Now it's like here, like we see different sentences, but without any additional lines, which means when you're writing the files, you will need to add the skip line, the next line mark as well. So you can make sure the different sentence will be writing into different lines. So we write this file again. Remember, if you are open this in a writing form, it will overwrite the original files and then only give you the new one. Okay. So we are executing this one again. So this file again showing up in the directory, the same as the IPython notebook. So this time the output will be into different lines. Okay. Now we are reading this file again and printing the line. You can see the files is 3 sentences skipped by 1 line. Okay. Here is just examples is that if we're trying to remove extra lines, we can also use the technique we learned yesterday to strip the empty spaces with the strip functions. Okay. So for every line, if we apply for the strip functions, these extra lines will be removed. Okay. So there will be the same line without extra lines. Also, you can print with empty strings as an end. They will give you the same result. Okay. Okay, I think I'll stop here for today's class. And for students, don't forget to finish the assignment. So the deadline will be next Fridays, but I encourage you to finish as soon as possible when you still familiar with what we've just learned. Okay, you should be able to answer the questions by the materials we've going through in day 1 and day 2. Okay. So I'll stay for a while. So if you have questions, I'll be here. Otherwise, I'll see you guys tomorrow.
So for these series, we wanna like ask for like an input n or like, 'cause otherwise, I mean, it's like.
You can see them and.
Or just do like random.
Yeah.
Large numbers or something. Okay, okay.
I just need to see it concept as well.
Okay.
That is-
Fair.
Okay, so yeah, just last question. So for,
Yeah.
is that just for this? So do you follow for the element part? Once you